Joseph, thanks for being back.
Hey, thanks for having me back on.
Excellent. In our last conversation, we touched a lot of subjects that I haven't heard from anyone before, and definitely not a perspective I've heard anywhere before. One of the things we're going to discuss tonight, and for me more important, is and I'm going to ask this a lot through the duration of these podcasts. What do you think the world, the reception of the worldwide religion, how are they going to take to, if per se advanced aliens show up here? What's the reception by religion as a whole?
Well, that's an interesting question because, one, I don't believe they're going to show up here. But let's play with that hypothesis if they were to show up here. The different belief systems in the world will probably recognize it from their own perspectives of their belief system. But the ones that I do know about, let's say Catholicism, if you look at what the information that's coming out from the Vatican on, UFOs and aliens, they want to preach the gospel to them and baptize them and bring them into the fold. They say that ET is our brother, but everything that our research has shown is that's not to be true. So looking at it from the Protestant side of the Christian realm, the thing that a Christian would have to ask is, what does God say about all this? Because Christians trust what they call the Bible, which is the Word of God. And if God had anything to say about this, or not, it would be in the Bible or not. But there's a lot to be said about the possibility of other life being out there in Scripture. It doesn't specifically talk about other life out there. So that would be something that, you'd have to think about there. If it wasn't talked about, maybe it wasn't important or it wasn't there at all. There are some areas in Scripture to look at. It's a great study to look at what does God say about all this. And specifically, if you go to the end times in Revelation and you get to the point where it talks about who's in heaven, it gives you a vision of heaven and who is there. And the only people that are there are the redeemed humans. Okay, there's nothing stated at all about there being other beings in heaven after the end times. So that's something that makes you think about maybe there isn't anybody else. If you take it back to Genesis in the beginning, where it talks about the fall of humanity, where Adam and Eve were tempted by Satan, and they ate of the apple of the tree of good and evil and got the knowledge of good and evil, but they sinned against God. In other words, they didn't follow his commands, which said not to eat of that tree. So humanity took a fall from that, and the whole story of Christianity is about God's redeeming mankind to be able to come back in communion with him. Because in the garden it says God walked with Adam and Eve. But that separation, when they sinned, they were no longer in God's presence. And God has been trying to do everything through history to be able to bring humanity back into his fold, back where we could be one with him. That's the whole biblical message.
As a species, we failed at that, I feel.
What's that?
As a species, I feel like we kind of dropped the ball there, right?
This is what the cosmic war is all about, because Satan has been trying to prevent this from happening ever since it started from the very beginning. He's been jealous of humanity and jealous of God, and him being the number one. Satan wanted to be like God or be God. But Satan's a created being by God. So he wasn't going to be God, but he wanted to be like God. The thing is, Satan was cast to this earth. He's the Lord of this earth until the end times when Jesus comes and takes control again. But this whole work for redemption of humanity has been fought all through history. And that's what the Bible talks about. And you'll see that in there is that whole fight, this cosmic war between good and evil, this cosmic war between Satan and God over humanity. You know, God promised humanity something very special, promised them the blessed hope and eternal life with God himself, be able to come back into God's family. The thing is that Satan, he's doomed. He doesn't get that. He gets into the fiery pit, or into the lake of fire, they call it. And the thing is, God has given humanity free will to make choice over what they want to worship, what they want to choose. And because of that free will choice, the enemy has used that opportunity for temptation, seduction, delusion, deception, to be able to keep humanity from getting to that blessed hope that God promised us. So if you look at this whole thing from the Christian perspective, they're understanding what this is. I don't think that the church is going to be deceived by this at all. I think, like what the secular realm has been believing all these years, is, taken from the Brookings Institute report that was contracted by NASA to find out what the repercussions would be if they had come across anything that showed that there was life out there in the universe through their travels. And that report, gave the hint that possibly the belief systems of the world, the religions, would be turned upside down by, this discovery. But I really think that the opposite is going to happen with Christianity. Christianity is going to recognize this for what it is, a major deception, because we understand the abilities of these entities in this cosmic war. It's an angelic realm that we're dealing against, a demonic angelic realm that's trying to prevent humanity from getting that blessed hope. So we know that they deal in deception, they deal in lies, and that's what we're seeing here in our research. Is that's what we've uncovered, that's exactly what this is. And if we get this message out to the church, they're not going to be deceived by it at all.
In my off podcast interviews, I'm finding I'm finding a kind of a similarity between faith of religion and faith of UFOs for some of the people that, and this is just some of the ones that who have claimed to be abducted and or had an experience. The way they believe in the UFOs is almost the same faith I see in people who believe in religion. It has a profound effect on them in their life. Everything about it has a full effect on them. And it's like a religious belief in what they believe beyond any reason of doubt that what they encountered was real. So I guess what I'm going to ask is, in your findings, how often is it that you're finding people that have an abduction incident and or a sighting, and you find them to be, their belief system to be just as strong as it's like the same kind of faith as having a religious belief?
No, every time. I mean, this is how convincing this experience is. Our evidence is showing that it's not a true life experience, that it's a deceptive, visionary type experience given to them during the sleep state. But it's so sensational, so real, so impacting on them that they can't think that it could be anything else but real. It's hard. I have to put it this way. It's hard for a human being, and you probably know it as well as I do, to admit they're wrong, to admit that you've been deceived. That's a very hard, humbling thing for a human to do. We've all had issues where we've been called out for something and said, no, you're wrong. And it's very hard to accept, And the alternative here in this experience, this abduction experience, the alternative to it being alien, extraterrestrial, it's not a better thing.
Well,
It's a worse thing.
right.
If this is an alien, which you could easily accept because we really don't know what aliens are or their purpose, if there were any, but to accept the alternative, which this is a demonic entity that's been dealing with you, that's very difficult to accept. That's scary.
Since you and I had that discussion, there's a large percentage of literature I've read that speaks about the demons and aliens and the similarities and the comparisons or they're one and the same. I've read a lot. This isn't. It's not like this is the opinion of one. I heard this in a lot of places, a lot, and some of the readings I've read about demons and aliens being one and the same, they don't even come from religious people. These are, I guess, I can't call them scientists. They're researchers, private researchers, and they seem to be finding links between them them being set. I personally, you know my theory. I personally think if the aliens that people are reporting are robotic beings with consciousness uploaded, that's, if I were to want to explore other planets, it wouldn't make sense for me to do it with biology. I would probably create something to go do it for me, right? It's what we're doing now, right? We're sending rovers.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but the link between the demons and the aliens, when I hear this, I don't dismiss anything, right? Because I don't know enough, but some of it's pretty compelling. Because if you wonder, when you read what a demon is, again, like you said, it's a deceptive entity, and it could portray whatever it feels like to portray for that individual anyhow.
Absolutely. And, let me give you a couple quotes here. And this is from somebody who is a secular person. Researchers who think of UFOs as machines operating in our normal space-time have not listened carefully enough to those who have seen the phenomenon up close. Here's another one, same person. I had concluded that the UFO phenomenon was real in a physical sense, but also in a spiritual and paranormal sense, a fact that did not sit well with many fellow researchers. The intelligence agencies exploited the belief systems created in the wake of the phenomenon. They injected spurious data and manipulated opinion for their own purposes, which range from psychological warfare and active measures to the disguising of high-tech prototypes. That's Jack Valet. That's one of the most noted researchers in ufology, most respected in ufology. He worked back in the time of J. Allen Hynek. These are the pioneers of this phenomenon, and this is coming from him. Here's another one. The UFO phenomenon appears to me as a paraphysical intrusion into our physical dimension by an unknown intelligence or unknown sentient entities, paraphysically materializing themselves to a pre-selected observer or a group of observers, whether large or small, and presenting to the observer a physical extraterrestrial phenomenon and visitations for reasons yet unknown. And that's from researcher Norio Hayakawa. And then here's one from the late Dr. Carla Turner. She was a PhD, an abductee, and trying to figure this out. This phenomenon simply can't be explained in terms of crossbreeding experiments or scientific research into the human physiology. Before we allow ourselves to believe in the benevolence of alien interaction, we should ask, do enlightened beings need to use the cover of night to perform good deeds? Do they need to paralyze us and render us helpless to resist? Do angels need to steal our fetuses? Do they need to manipulate our children's genitals and probe our rectums? Are fear, pain, and deception consistent with high spiritual motives? These are powerful quotes from leading researchers, and we were supposed to learn from history, but people, they kind of ignore these quotes, the researchers do, and the people that are looking at this phenomenon. These quotes here scare them. They don't know how to answer that.
Well, I can understand. Listen, I get it, especially listeners. And the off the record people I've interviewed, I could sense in what they're saying, they're 100% behind what they're saying. So, and a few of them, and again, that's why I wrote this down in notes, the relationship and the similarity of religious hope and faith and their hope and faith in this. I mean, one individual I'd spoken to had told me she saw a UAP and it went, below the waves, and she was humbled by it and said something like, if you're not ready for me to see you at this moment, I understand. Like almost the way you would speak to God if you were praying, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was compelled to talk to her longer. I found her very interesting. I'm trying to figure out a way to get her on the show without, because look, she doesn't want the ridicule. I don't blame her. No one wants to be ridiculed. I don't judge anyone. I don't know enough of anything to pass judgment in the first place. I'm trying. The whole purpose of this is for me to learn. But she had conviction in everything she said, and I'm gonna lean towards whatever she did have can be compared to a religious kind of phenomena, because maybe it chose for her to see that to make it easier for her to accept. I'm not sure. Again, for me, I never see anything. Joseph, you got to know, I really want to. I really do. And then I hear these stories, and the more I'm hearing them, there's a common, and most of the people I'm speaking to, they're married, they have children, they have careers.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to go on public record, but they do talk to me, and I take notes. I happily speak to them, take notes. There's an interesting guy I was speaking to on LinkedIn, and he's like a wealth of information. Let me get that name. It's Rick Warner, I believe. He has a website I was reading on. It was pretty interesting. Here, let me pull it up for you. Yeah, it's Rick Warner. And he has this website called, he just sent it to me. Here it is, ERC, Extraterrestrial Research Center. He's got a lot of perspectives, more than, coming into this, I only knew what I thought I knew and what I was trying to know, or trying to learn anyway. And he's got remarkable perspectives. I mean, and I write it all down. There's no harm. Information is one of those things that you can't have enough of it if you want to be educated on anything. You just,
sure.
There is no bad information. Even false information is something you can look at to reference, what you learn in the future, or else you're not going to be able to deal with it when you encounter it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something I've been doing, the whole 27 years of this research. I take it all in, because if you, like I say, in my talks, if you're trying to uncover what this actually is, all the pieces of the puzzle need to come to the table, whether they're real pieces or not. But it gives you that understanding of what you're actually dealing with.
Right. So in your research, what are common patterns you're seeing in abductees? Like, there's got to be some kind of, and I ask this because in the percentage of people I'd spoken to, I kind of see a pattern. And I'm not saying this to be negative, but a lot of people that I've spoken to they suffered head injury, significant head injuries. I've suffered head injuries myself. That led me to being more musically inclined than anything else, but not all of them have the head injury, but the majority I'd spoken to had suffered, and I have to ask these questions, Wordy, and I'm not asking again to be a jerk. I'm just trying to figure out a pattern. And so far the pattern, a small percentage anyway, is severe head injury. Are you encountering a lot of that?
You're talking about prior to having an experience?
Yeah, prior to an experience. And that's not when I ask this question, not just that, I don't want to isolate that, but what patterns are you finding in abductees? Well,
looking at it from the science perspective and from the perspective of a Christian researcher, from the scientific perspective, we know that a lot of experiences can be caused by medical condition. Okay, just prefrontal epilepsy is one of them, that when people have that, they have similar experience to the abduction experience. You see a lot of the similarities there. There's other things that can cause this medically, and that could be through prescription medication, too much prescription medication, because we also see it in other types of medications whether it be, what do you call it, illegal drugs,
Right.
anything that's mind altering type of medication or drugs, the ayahuasca or the DMT. I've actually got testimonies of people who were on methamphetamine, large amounts, during their experiences under these types of drugs. They encountered the same beings, the entities that we see during the abduction experience. And how is that even possible? If these are supposedly extraterrestrial biological entities, how are they showing up during a drug induced, experience?
That's okay. So that's a good point. And I've heard that. I've read that and heard it about people with DMT experiences, encountering these entities. That is, that speaks to the subconscious mind, but also I heard someone tell me that, again, I don't know how much the science supports this, but when you take these mind altering drugs, you're able to have more of a sense of, I guess you could see through realms or dimensions. It opens up an ability to have an awareness you didn't have otherwise. I personally, again, I never did hard drugs. So I've never experienced what it is they may or may not be doing, but Joseph, over the last week, I've spoken to some paranormal investigators and I'm speaking to some UFO researchers. And one common thing I find is most people's ability to have perception of what's around them. For me, I use this term, having a strong 360, meaning I pay attention to what's around me 360 degrees pretty much always, right? I'm always aware. Sure. But that doesn't mean I'm aware of every single thing. And I certainly don't have I don't have any psychic ability. That's another subject I'm going to touch later on. I'm having a tough time with that one, but the common ground I see is with these people have these experiences and these reoccurring experiences, it seems to have a trend to it, whether it be ghosts or UFOs. And again, I'm not discrediting anyone. Obviously I can't discredit UFOs because again, we have our military side. That reassures me something's flying out there we don't know about. But what do you think the pattern is with people when they're having these experiences, and is it generational? Are they selected?
Well, I'll go back to that quote by Norio Hayakawa. He says, paraphysically materializing themselves to a pre-selected, parentheses, observer. Okay, what does that mean? Pre-selected. Okay, who selected them? Did the observer select the experience, or did the experience select the observer? That's something we need to look at there. And in our research, we found 3 answers to why people have this experience. 1, they asked for it. 2, they were unknowingly dealing with things like the occult, the paranormal, New Age, and metaphysics. Anything that the Bible says not to deal with, not to mess with, we found that people dealing in those areas and practicing in those areas were open to this experience. And then again, the third one, finding that, people saying that, well, I don't fit those first 2 because I've had this since I was a child. Well, we went back and re-interviewed these experiencers and asked them about their family life and what it was like. And we found that in every time, the parents were the ones that were dabbling in these areas, which left it open for these entities to have a right to come in and mess with the children also.
That's via the occult, right?
Yeah. Well, occult or anything that's, like I said, the Bible tells us not to mess with, which nowadays we would call the occult, the paranormal, Right. And then, of course, you got the metaphysics realm and the New Age realm, which is a pseudo-religion in itself.
I haven't touched much of that yet. I don't know. On this journey for this podcast and all the mysterious stuff I want to find out, there's some stuff out there that I don't know if I'm ready to. I'm not that I'm not ready to accept it. I'm just not ready to learn about it yet. It's so. Again, I got some information from a source. I watched half of the 2-hour documentary, and I paused it, and I had to get up and walk around to try to tune back in. I'm like, what am I hearing? And the worst part is the researchers they have in the film, they have a really compelling argument. They're not buffoons. These are PhDs as well. And I had to pause, and it's one of those things like, can I digest this right now? I don't know if I can. And that made me wonder, do I represent a large portion of humanity? Like, how many of us are just not willing to digest something yet? I'm not ready for that yet. Maybe I'm not accepting it, but I'm just not ready for it yet.
It is a large portion.
Yeah, because I'm really open to all this. I'm excited. Again, Joseph, eventually I'm going to go out and do a documentary. And the goal with the UFOs and making this network I'm doing on this podcast is where I travel state to state, I'll have a connection pointing me in a direction where I should look, what I should film. So I'm not out there staring at blankness.
Sure.
And I'd stated this before. I've had someone offer to sponsor. I refuse sponsors. Why? Because I don't want to be curated. And I don't want to put something exciting where something's not exciting. If I'm just staring into darkness and it's boring, so be it. If I find something, I want it to be organic, original, real. So, and I feel like that's going to prove tough on me. I feel like it is. Although I've heard some people reference Skinwalker Ranch to go around there, and it's like they're saying, one guy was telling me it's guaranteed you're going to see something. But I saw an episode. What was that show? Joe Rogan did a show, and I can't remember the name. I think it's Joe Rogan Questions Everything. And he went there and he saw nothing, and he's Joe Rogan's like the gold standard for podcasting and being very upfront about things, right? So it discouraged me from going there. But, again, to experience it for myself, I'm going to go. Why not? I'm going to film. I know it's a hot spot. For you, Joseph, in all your investigative study, what are 2 cases you came across that both you couldn't explain rationally or scientifically?
Well, let me just give you one of my better cases.
Okay.
And let you make a observation on it. In the beginning, when I first came to an understanding of what I was dealing with here and came across that first case, and then subsequently later, other cases started coming in where people had been able to stop their experiences using the name and authority of Jesus Christ. We started putting the information out there in the very beginning on the early internet. I mean, the internet had just started when we had started into this. And, I didn't even have a computer. My partner did, and he was putting the stuff up there. As the information started to get out and more people started coming across what we were working on, one of the most fascinating cases came locally to me. And, I was working at a boat company for 24 years, and I had a lot of friends there I'd known for, 20 plus years working with them every day. And I had people that watched me go into this realm, ufology, and, they had every joke you could come up with,
Oh, of course.
To me for ridicule, because they didn't understand it and they didn't believe it. And I didn't either in the beginning, but I was giving it an honest go to show itself. And I had one friend there at work that he had the best jokes, about ufology and about aliens and all of that. And, I loved him to death, and I loved his jokes. They were actually very good. But one day, I was working second shift at the time. I was running a weld shop for mold fabrication and stuff there at the facility. So I was getting off about 11 o'clock at night, and he was on day shift, and we had talked a bit. He was always joking, but also asking questions. And then one day I get a call from him as I got home from work. He knew what time I was getting off, and he calls me as I walked into my house. And I said, "Yeah, what's up?" And he says, I would just want to apologize for, all the ridicule I've given you. And I go, "Why do you say that?" He goes, "Because I haven't told anybody, but I figured you would be the best to listen to. I've been having these experiences, and they're not bad experiences. They're, it's kind of communication with these entities. And He says, I just want to let you know that I do understand that, this is very bizarre and this is hard for people to understand. But, again, I want to apologize for all the jokes. And I said, okay. I said, you ever want to talk about it in depth? I'm here for you. He said, okay. Well, a few nights later, this was like a Monday night when he first called. And then Thursday night, same week, after he had talked to me and saying he was having these experiences and actually willing to talk about them, he had gone out with his girlfriend to the bar scene. They were on a darts team, the bar play against bar,
Right.
And they have team dart competition. Well, they were on this darts team and they were going to the different bar to play competition with another bar. And he didn't drive. His girlfriend was driving. Well, they really didn't do a lot of drinking because they were concentrating on doing good on darts. But as they were leaving the first place in their competition, and they had to go to another bar to play another team in the same evening, as they were leaving the first time, he said that he had had this experience while they were in the car. And he was terrified because here this one wasn't as nice as what he'd been having before. And he didn't understand that. And he's trying to share it with me, but I could tell he was very upset. And then he said it actually happened again after the second time when they were heading home. Well, as he's trying to relay this information to me, I could tell he was very upset and nervous about trying to get it out. And he told me, he says, they're coming again. And I said, well, hang on, and I'm trying to keep him, talking to me on the phone so nothing would happen. And he yells out, they're pissed at you. And I said, what? He says, they're pissed at you. And I said, what are they pissed at me for? He says, because you know what the blank is going on. And I said, do you know what I have found in my research? He says, I have no clue, but they do. And then right about that time, he went out and his girlfriend got on the phone, and she's asking, who are you and what's happened to my boyfriend? And I told her who I was, and I said, just hang on. He's going to be fine. Just hang with me here and I'll explain. And it wasn't a few minutes went by and he come to. And she was calmed down a bit after that. And then I said, what did you see tonight? And she relayed to me what she saw as, because she wasn't a participant. She was there, a witness to what happened. She says after they left the first bar, he became very agitated and he was saying, they're coming, they're coming. And the next thing you know, he just keeled over in the passenger seat. And she thought he had had a heart attack or something. She pulled over, checked him, but he was okay. And only a couple minutes went by and he wakes back up and he's all startled and, upset. But he didn't tell her anything. She had no idea he was having these experiences. And then the same thing happened again later. And, I told her he's going to be okay. Okay. Just let me work with him on this and we'll keep you, filled in on what's going on. And he got back on the phone and he says, I don't like this. I need your help. And I said, well, I just got in from work. I said, you're off tomorrow, because they were working 4 10s. And I would be off the next day too. And I said, let's meet in the morning. Get some sleep. You're going to be fine. And I'll come over in the morning and we'll, sit down and talk about all this. Because I was going to show him what I had found, and give him some help. Well, I went the next day and I had one of my researchers, which was my girlfriend at the time, that was working with me with abductions. She worked a lot with the women abductees. And I said, can you meet me, over at this guy's place? And we need to talk to him. And also another friend of mine that was a friend of him and me, he was a Christian too. And I asked him, would you mind coming along? He says, no, not at all. And we all met at his place. And, you could tell he was pretty well still agitated from the night before and upset. And I said, look, we're just going to have you tell us everything that happened to you that you can remember? We're going to start there. So we sat and he started into the story and took us through the whole thing. And by the time he got to the end, he could tell he was starting to get agitated, really agitated again. And I said, what's happening? He says, they're coming again. I said, you can tell that now that you're going to be taken again? He says, yeah, and I don't want this to happen. My girlfriend, also a Christian, gets up, walks over behind him, puts both hands on the back of his shoulders, and starts saying that, you cannot take him. This is a child of God. You have no right to intrude in his life, and just rebuking these entities. And as she continued to do this calm came over him, and he looked at us and said, how did you do that? Because he realized that the abduction had been stopped. And I said, well, we can share with you how this happens, and you can do this, not us. So we went on to be able to share the research with him. But the most fascinating thing about that whole experience was the communication that he had with them about what I was doing. They knew what I was doing. They knew what I had found, and they did not want him to be privy to that information. They wanted a hold on him.
Huh.
The other thing is about this experience is he didn't go anywhere. We had a witness right there with him, because every time he came out of this experience, which was only a couple minutes long in actual time, to him it seemed like it had been an extremely long time. So there was time distortion involved in his memory of the experience. It was a long time of an experience to him, but only a couple minutes to us.
To him, did he believe he left? Like he was no longer there?
Yes.
Huh.
Every aspect of his story was just like you would hear from an abduction experiencer. And an abduction experiencer, you got to keep in mind that almost every single experiencer that has a story to tell, if you listen carefully, you will hear where this is coming from. They will say, and when I woke up, when you woke up.
Yeah. From my perspective, it sounds like, again, I think we discussed this before, but it sounds like aliens are the new scapegoat, right? For this particular situation, for entities of that. Like, I guess before they were popular, I recently had a conversation with someone about vampires were really like a big thing long ago, and prior to that. So it seems
so were elves and fairies.
Right. So it seems like there's a new scapegoat depending on popular culture.
It's a new guise by the same source.
Right. So, but
you wouldn't believe in leprechauns and fairies and elves today, but you would believe in a very high technological space alien.
Right. But many years ago, it was practical. I see what you're saying, and it makes sense. I don't think that accounts for 100% of abductees, because one of the people I'd spoken to, again, off record, he's an attorney, and I'm trying hard to get him on the show because his story gave me chills, and it wasn't. I guess it's hard because people don't want to destroy their credibility. I get that. I really want him on here, but his story, and he has, again, the whole line of questioning, head injuries or experiences with drugs, et cetera, et cetera. He seems up and up, but his experience wasn't very typical of other ones that I've heard. This one would more or less have him in a sleepwalking state, which again, this comes back to sleep a lot, and sleep paralysis, and and again, I'm not excusing it for everyone, but he would feel he would sleepwalk and know he's sleepwalking. He couldn't stop himself, and he would find himself leaving the house, and then that's where they would take him, and so on and so forth. I don't want to tell his whole story, but I do see a lot of patterns, like a lot of similarity. He's the exception. So I guess I got to ask, outside of that case, So again, we do know there's things flying around the atmosphere. That it's indisputable. We know that. In your research or the researchers of anyone of your team, how many of you encountered like a craft yourself?
None.
Yeah. See, that's same. I haven't seen anything. I really want to, but I don't know, Joseph. What do you think? All right. So what do you think? What do we see coming in the next 10 years? How does this unfold?
Well, there's two options. One, we're gonna figure this out ourselves, and it's not going to be what people think it is, which is, I think, what the government's doing with us right now is they want us to uncover this. It's kind of like watching the movie. What's the one where they took the people back in the dream state to try and convince them about changing something?
Inception with
Inception.
Yeah, good movie.
Yes. The biggest thing about that, and I think this is exactly what we're seeing with this disclosure, is for us to accept something so strange like this, we have to own it. And the way we own it is we come across the answer ourselves. And if you listen to Louis Elizondo, this is kind of what he's telling us, is we need to figure this out. Because if the government was to come out and say what I believe this truly is, and I think a lot of them know what this truly is, it would turn society upside down. And maybe part of society wouldn't accept what they're saying. They'd say, oh, no, you're lying to us again. So the best way for them to get this out to us is to give us as much of the information as they know and let us figure it out for what it is.
Right.
Again, going back to Louis Elizondo, if you look at what he's been saying, he's saying that we need to look at this from a whole nother perspective. He talks about these entities seem to have been around since the beginning of time. He's talking about this. He's talking the same language that Christians talk about angels, right. That these things can defy physics. They appear and they don't appear. They're coming from another realm completely. He's describing everything that a Christian would give attributes to an angel to, something from the spirit realm.
So why did they, again, not knowing enough about it from my perspective, why would they appear in the form of like the Tic Tac or just the pyramid ones have me, I saw, I don't know if you saw that video. Mm-hmm. They have the night vision. It's on a military ship and they're recording these like pyramids. Those they compute, and if we're talking about thousands of years ago, I see the relationships. But it's hard to ask this question, but do they appear the way they do because that's accepting to us, or are we just not supposed to see that? And because of our technology, we're stumbling on it more now.
No, I think they're showing it. And I go back to the same thing that Norio Hayakawa said. Pre-selected observer or group of observers. I think that this whole thing is to promote a deception, to get humanity to fall for it.
Right.
And I think that we're seeing these, crazy different types of craft, for that reason, is to keep us off track. Why is it you never see the two same UFO, well, not say UFO, but so-called flying saucers? Why are you never see two alike? Why is it that never is there two identical? How can there be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands all different from each other? That doesn't make sense. That's one of those red flags you got to think about.
That's a pretty strong point. The only one, the gimbal, if you listen to Bob Lazar's description, the gimbal falls pretty strongly behind the way he described that. But it's not observed widely, right? The Tic Tac, over the years, I've come to realize that the Tic Tac, the way Fravor describes it, is this like almost identical to the cigar things we've been seeing throughout time. It's described.
Sure.
So there are similarities as description, but as far
but not identical.
But not identical, right? Definitely not factory made. That's a good point. I'm gonna have to look more into that. That's going to be one of my next things is looking into. The problem is there's so many reports. When I started looking at, I was overwhelmed. I started looking at reports. I was done. I couldn't do it. Too many.
Well, you got to consider MUFON's been just MUFON. not counting the other organizations that are out there and have been out there for years. But MUFON's been around since 1969, building their database, on UFO reports. I get a report because I'm a national director for Korea. I get a report every month on the number of sightings, the type of sightings, and it's a query of, what are they seeing? How many? What's the number one? And, just in the U.S. alone, because they're giving it for the whole world, all the countries that come in for MUFON, reports that come in, and this is just for MUFON. Just in the U.S. alone, who's the number one country for sighting reports, they're averaging anywhere from 450 to 650 sightings a month of reports coming in. You add that up times 12 months, times 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, that's a whole lot of sightings.
Right.
Well, that's a whole lot.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. Very much so. Before we cut off, I'm going to ask you about one thing. We'll sum it up fast because, we'll move on for another when it comes. What do you think of this Bigfoot phenomena? Because this is the one subject I'm having the absolute hardest time sinking my teeth into. I'm almost to the point where I don't even think I'm going to have an episode regarding it. Because I can't seem to find an expert that's willing to speak scientifically about what they found. Today with IR cameras, drones, satellite, the ability to find chipmunks in the middle of the night if we need to, I'm having a hard time with that. What is your feeling on that?
I believe Bigfoot is just another layer of this deceptive onion that as you peel back the layers, you come across more and more parts of the deception, whether it be you're dealing with Bigfoot, whether you're dealing with ghosts, whether you're dealing with cattle mutilations, whether you're dealing with crop circles, they're all connected. And why would they be all connected? And, why are Bigfoot and UFO sightings common together? Why is that?
Yeah.
Why are you having abductees that are seeing dead relatives on the spacecraft?
Yeah.
What sense does that make?
According to Skinwalker Ranch, it's all there. All.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
But they're looking for it.
The only anomaly scientifically that I've read about that place thus far is there is something odd about the magnetic structure around it, and I don't know. I'll have to, that'll down the road. I'll figure that out. But Joe, the Christian point of view as a it's good to have. I'm definitely going to call on you in the future for more of those because I'm learning now. I'm going to encounter a lot of perspectives, a lot science ones, pure belief, and hopefully by the end of the 18-month period, I'm gonna before I set out into the world, I'll have a good idea of what direction to head in.
Sure. I got to remind you that I didn't start out as a Christian looking at this. I started out as an agnostic humanist looking at it from strictly a scientific point of view. Huh. That was my perspective. Okay, so I've had an opportunity to strictly look at it as that being my only perspective. And then spending 4 years into the New Age metaphysical realm, that gave me a complete different perspective to look at this phenomenon. And then again, becoming a Christian myself later in the work, it gave me yet another perspective to look at this phenomenon from. I've had an opportunity to look at this from 3 distinct perspectives in my research. And it was this one where I'm at now that gives me the most answers that seem to be able to solve this puzzle.
And you have a strong belief of what it is.
Well, I based it on the evidence,
right?
And that's something that, you have to keep in mind is a lot of people, they don't even care for the evidence. No, I know what I believe.
Right.
I know what I saw. Well, do you really? Have you really picked it apart to look at it and to see what is it that you saw?
That's why
most people don't.
That's why I was drawing to you earlier about the similarity of, faith in religion and faith in UFOs. It's got it rings the same bell. It's that strong.
Well, not really, because faith in Christianity that faith is based on evidence. We have plenty of evidence to show that Christianity is not something that is strictly, just trust me on this. No.
Right.
I mean, the evidence there is just overwhelming, in archaeology, in prophecy fulfillment, in the Bible itself. These are things that isn't there in the UFO paranormal realm. It's nothing compared to what we have actually as Christians.
That's true, because there's no museum with a UFO sitting in it currently, right?
No.
And like I said this before, the old me was, in the cage or body on the table, right? That was my evidence. For me, moving forward, I'm going to make room for whatever I can and just discover whatever I can.
Bring all the pieces to the table.
Yep.
To get an honest picture of what you're dealing with.
And that's going to help satisfy the curiosity of the childlike mind I possess. But Joe,
and hopefully for everybody else that also looking at it.
Right, Joe, it's a pleasure. I like having you on.
Thank you. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. I'll stay in contact with you, Joe.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.